Oamaru, where stone rocks. Old-looking buildings and little blue penguins are the town's current cash crop. A group of these delightful birds is called a raft, by the way, and rafts bob in each night to find the penguin equivalent of Airbnbs. They draw the kind of crowds even Twain would have envied.
Back in the day when I first met Oamaru, I remember thinking, what a cool wide main road, and what dope white stone buildings. It suggested a past that is still quite present.
Oamaru Museum's Chloe Searle is sharing the buzz on Oamaru.
It seems like Oamaru was quite a thriving town back then.
Sort of thriving on the surface in the sense of these gorgeous buildings going up, but in terms of sanitation, not so good.
Really?
Yeah, so, I mean, today we take for granted you can turn on the tap, get some nice clean drinking water, but for Victorian Oamaru, that was actually a real struggle. People were drinking water out of Oamaru Creek, which is also where they were washing their clothes, and people would drown in there, and it just, not a good place to get your drinking water. A lot of drinking and quite a few brothels. Oamaru was famous for having a lot of sly grogging and a lot of prostitutes, basically.
And sly grogging, they would have needed the water for that.
Oh yeah,
too,
definitely.
Do you think that's why sly grogging was quite a thing, just to kind of forget the yucky water?
I think it probably was. You could probably tell yourself that a beer is nice and hygienic, so just have a few of those instead of drinking the creek water.
With 3 males for every female, there was a bit of a woman drought, and that led to the Red Plague. Frequenting one of the town's many brothels spread trouble around Oamaru like wildfire.
So with the people of Oamaru with no clean water and suffering all kinds of horrible diseases, they badly needed a solution. This is part of it here.
The Oamaru Council hatched an ambitious plan to take water from the Waitaki River to the taps of Oamaruvians. In a miracle of civil engineering, a 50-kilometre water race was constructed, and the remnants can still be seen today.
This is an example of Victorian civil engineering that has very few other equivalents in the country. I'm sure of that. It's a treasure for all of New Zealand, but it just happens to be tucked away in North Otago.
Local boffin Bruce is obsessed with this engineering enigma and thinks it should be a structure of national significance. I tend to agree.
Well, we're walking on the old water race here, Oscar. It flowed at about walking speed, but it delivered about 5,000 litres a minute.
What?
How would you like to dig this, man? 50 kilometres.
I guess the advantage back then is you wouldn't have had that traffic control and cones, which would have annoyed all the people on their horses.
No resource management act. No, somebody in the council said, let's build a water race. And somebody else said, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I'll get the money, you get the men, and we'll do it. Wouldn't it be good if the world was like that now, eh? Yeah.
This feels like a special place. What is this?
This is Oamaru's water supply reservoir. So the water supply that came from Duntroon in an open race over aqueducts and through tunnels and gradually filled this pond up with water.
So this is where the water completes its 50-kilometre journey.
Yes, and it went from here, under the water, and through huge cast iron pipes into Oamaru, which is, by the way, a long way away.
You're very passionate about this, aren't you, Bruce?
Hell yeah.
Why? Why should we care?
Oamaru as a town wouldn't have existed unless we had clean water. Ultimately, we would have run out of stream and roof water, and the town would have shriveled and died. It was a huge financial commitment for the council of the time. They did it because they were convinced that Oamaru was going to be New Zealand's most famous city. Well, things transpire, don't they, you know?
I noticed that because it's such a big main street, isn't it? It looks like a big city.
they planned for it to be a big city. But without this lake here, there would have been no Oamaru. I can tell you, it would have died.
It's amazing. That must have been a happy day in Oamaru. It would have been like getting the internet.
Yeah. Oh, it was bigger. I reckon it was bigger than that. Diphtheria and diarrhea and even more dangerous diseases virtually disappeared overnight. And it made Oamaru a unique town in the world that we derived the energy to make famous barbed wire, grind flour, everything. Instead of using a steam engine to do it, you could buy water and do it. When you went to see Mark Twain and the lights came on, it was generated by this water. It came here without too much dirt in it, but I think at some time or other, somebody might have released trout or something, and the engineer had to acknowledge one day in the newspapers in print that he apologised for the fish coming out of the taps.
So it not only watered the town, but it fed them in some instances.
Well, it'd have been good if it had been white, but you wouldn't have told the engineer, would you? He'd have just kept turning the tap on.
And it lasted 100 years.
103 years it was still delivering water to Oamaru. Not only that, but the pipes that are under the ground here and all the way into town have just been examined, checked out, buried again, and the engineer told me, personally, that they're good for another 150 years.
Wow.
So that those guys back in 1880 built something of which the bulk of it, or the working part of it, has got a 300-year life. That's not bad for civil engineering work.
That's amazing, and it was all hand-built. It was all before traffic control and cranes and everything.
I'm so glad it's still here. It's got all of the features that attracted me to this civil engineering. Elegance, structural strength. I mean, it's been through a few earthquakes. It's carried millions of tons of water in its lifetime, and you can still walk safely across it, you know, so...
Now, tell me, Bruce, what's wrong with you? What?
I'm not an ordinary Kiwi bloke.
I can see that.
You know that already.
Bruce, from the outside looking in, you think, what a geek. About something like the water race over 100 years old. But actually, I love geeks because they're not too cool for school. They're actually daring to be interested in something. And we need people like Bruce. And actually, I reckon this country's full of people like Bruce who are passionate about our history and who want to preserve it. And it's actually their passion that keeps it alive and preserves that knowledge for future generations. So to actually spend a bit of time in his company was a real privilege.